Hello everyone, and welcome to Exam 2 Review for Chapter 5, 6, and 7. My name is Professor Augusto Suarez, and I will be your host today for this excellent and exciting review for Exam 2. So let's get started. The first topic I want to talk about is debit versus credit card use. Now, some of you guys might not have a checking account, savings account, or even a credit card, but it is important to know the different options you have and how to utilize it properly. So we're going to just go over some of the quick benefits to using a credit card. The first one we're going to highlight is that credit cards enable you to enjoy products now. Now, why is this, different from cash? Well, let's say, for example, you want to get the new iPhone X and, you have to save, I assume, $800. Some people aren't going to have $800 disposable right away, but would rather pay off that amount in chunks so they could finance it using credit. Now, everybody would probably want to use credit because, instead of parting with $800, which you feel a little bit more, you're instead parting with $100. But there are some disadvantages to using the credit cards, which we're going to jump to the interest expense, right? To use financing and to be able to enjoy that, there is a fee associated with that. And that's why not everybody does that, okay? Credit is a substitute to cash. So instead of using cash in your pocket, you can use credit cards to pay for some of the things that you want. And the real reason credit cards are also a substitute for cash is you can't pay cash when you're shopping online. Now, I get it. You order something through Yelp or you order food. When the guy comes, you give him cash, right? But for things like Xbox One or Amazon, you can't, tell the guy like, hey, listen, I'm just gonna send me your address and I'll mail you some cash and I'll, put it in an envelope and a stamp and send it out. No, that doesn't work that way. You have to you have to use your credit card or your debit card. It's just how it is. With regards to some of the perks and benefits, some credit cards will give you cash and will give you discounts to certain special events, or if you're looking to travel, they'll give you points back so you could spend on traveling. Of course, sometimes they'll charge an annual fee for that, or some of the benefits don't compensate for the amount of money that you have to actually spend to get those perks. So, it's something to look out for. But if you find that some of the promotions give you some money back, maybe it's worth looking into, as long as you're not, breaking the bank to get those perks. Now, some of the disadvantages of credit, spoke about one before, but the one that we're going to highlight first is the temptation to overspend. Now, how many times do you hear of the horror story of somebody spent $3 million on their credit card? Well, not, to that extent, but, that they've overspent and they have to now pay off the credit card companies, or maybe you have a parent that says, I never use credit because I never want to be in debt. It happens, if you give somebody the tools without giving them the education, unfortunately, they could be taken advantage of. So that's really one big disadvantage of credit. The other thing is risk of failing to pay the credit cards back and then going into collection, which affects your credit tremendously. And if it goes to the complete extreme, you could end up declaring bankruptcy, which is talked about a little bit in Chapter 5. The other piece is, we spoke about it a little bit, is the interest expense. It costs money to borrow. And this cost is interest. And, not only is it affected by your credit score, how much interest you're charged, but it's also affected by risk. So credit cards come with a big risk because you use the money, right? And there's no guarantee that you're going to pay it back, aside from the trust that they have in you and your capacity to pay it back. But if that risk is really great, you're going to be paying a lot of interest to use that money. So for those of you who have bad credit, sometimes it pays off to just be able to pay off the credit card as soon as possible until you're able to build credit with the company you're using the credit. Now, the last thing is, and a very important piece, credit does not increase your purchasing power. And what that means is if you spend $400 on the credit card, you're going to have to pay that back eventually. So I used to think that if I had $200 in my checking account and $200 limit on my credit, I had $400 that I could use. But the reality is you're going to have to pay it back. So $200 in the checking account and a $200 balance on your credit card means you have no money in effect. And finally, the debit card are usually linked to deposit accounts or checking accounts, and have similar functions to the credit card, except you're not getting all the disadvantages that are associated with the credit card. Now, a lot of debit cards don't offer perks anymore because, frankly, it's a tool to help you. But if you are looking to build credit, there are prepaid cards and secured credit cards that work off of a deposit that you put in and kind of act in the same function as a credit card and allow you to build credit in a safer way. So when it comes to loans, the one that usually comes to mind is a credit card, right? Because everybody, talks about credit cards. You go into any bank, they try to offer you a credit card, like, hey, use this new card, gives you 20% back on your purchase. Yeah, credit cards are great, but these are key terms that are associated with all loans, and we're just going to use credit cards as the example that's really going to help us to understand what each thing is. So when we're talking about principal, right? Principal is the amount being borrowed. So let's say, for example, I use my credit card to buy the newest iPhone, right? And I agree that this iPhone is worth $800, right? So my principal is this $800 that I agreed to pay for it. That's what I owe, okay? Now, when it comes to interest, right, the interest is the periodic charge for the use of credit. So the bank will charge me a percentage of what I borrowed for a certain period of time because they want that money back, and that's what it costs them to lend me that money, right? So there's a couple features to interest, or there's a couple aspects that affect interest, and that is, the main one is obviously risk, right? And the risk that A, I won't pay them back, or B, the risk of losing the $800 because if I decide, you know what, I don't want the iPhone, I'm just going to give it back to the store will give me back the $800, and there's no harm done. I don't have to pay interest. But if I damage the iPhone and they say, you know what, we're only going to give you $700, guess what? The people that lend me the money are only getting $700 back. So that risk of losing money or depreciation, right, will cause my interest to go up. Other risks associated with lending me that $800 could even extend far beyond things that are in my control, like the opportunity that the bank is giving up by lending me $800 to invest in another company that could get them more money. That risk is also associated with it. So all these features encompass what I have to pay to borrow that $800. The third aspect is the line of credit, which is simply the dollar amount of what they are extending to me. So if I use a credit card and I use it to buy that iPhone, right? This $800 is coming from the bank, and the bank is extending a line of credit or an access to this money so that way I could use it to buy my stuff. So there are different kinds of lines of credit, but the way you want to remember it is it's the dollar amount of what I'm borrowing, right? Now, what I have to pay, so based on how I pay this money back, right? And we already covered that, it's some portion of this balance here and an interest, right? And if I break it down into small chunks, all these payments, right? If I carve it up, this payment is going to be some principal, some interest, and that's going to be based on the things that we said before, but the actual payment is also associated with how many little chunks I'm deciding to pay, right? Or the pay period in which I decide I'm going to pay all this money back, right? So if I decide that instead of paying it in 15 months, I'm going to pay it in 12 months, guess what? I pay less in interest and I pay less overall. But if I decide I'm going to take longer to pay back the loan, then I'm going to pay more money, right? Because they have more chances to charge me interest. Now, if my interest rate is low or lower than what most people are, I'm going to be paying less because they're charging me less to use that money. Now, if my interest rate goes up, then I'm going to end up paying more overall because every time I make a payment, the cost is higher. And the last piece is if I borrow money, the more money I borrow, the more money I have to pay back. It's that simple, right? So anytime principal, interest, or the amount of time I take to pay goes up, I end up paying more, which is a key feature. So if you have any debt or ever take on any debt, the key is to pay it quickly and to pay the most that you can, or the highest amount of the balance that you can. So that way you're not getting charged interest on a lot of the principal. And last but not least is a grace period. With credit cards, they usually have a 25-day billing cycle. So if you purchase something 25 days later, you decide not to pay it back, they're going to charge you interest. So if you pay it within that 25-day grace period, you won't have to pay that interest. There are some loans that offer a grace period where you don't have to pay, which might seem great, but they do that at the cost of charging interest. And a lot of student loans are programmed that way. So again, if you take longer to pay it, you're going to pay more.
Lines of credit are the maximum dollar amount of credit that the lender has made available to you. This is another way of also saying what the amount is available for a credit card, right? Because let's say, for example, you open a business credit card account. Usually what they do is they extend a line of credit to your business and issue credit cards that are able to access a portion of that line of credit, and they'll give you as many credit cards as you need. So if you need a credit card for the office manager, they'll issue one for that. Or if you need a credit card for the CEO, or even some of the people who may be managing some of the resources or buying some of the supplies, you're able to issue multiple credit cards on the line of credit. But the complete balance, or the complete available amount of credit, is known as that line of credit. So it's important to take note of that.
Now, closed-end credit is a loan that's paid back in a specific period of time and is used for a specific purpose. And the reason we bring up closed-end credit because a lot of loans with low rates are closed-end credit because the banks or the companies issuing the loans expect to get that money back within a period of time. And that helps them to continue running their business. With credit cards, they are not closed-end but open-end credit because they are what we call revolving credit. You're always using it, you're always paying it, and it's always available to you. But with things like that, your interest rates are going to be higher. And like I said before, if interest rates go up, the amount you pay goes up. Cash advances are when you are getting cash and it's being made available to you on the spot. So one aspect about money that, I hope you start to learn as you're taking more finance courses or more business courses is that it has a time value, and money that is available today is more valuable than money payable next week. And an example I give my students is what's more valuable, $1 today or $1 next week. I'll tell you what, if you're going to give me the option, I'm going to take $1 today because I don't know if I'll see you next week. I don't know if you'll have the $1 next week, but I could use $1 today if you give it to me. So that's why cash advances, which are very convenient because their cash is made available at that same moment through lending, are also very expensive because there is that time value, and because they're making it available to you right away, they figure, well, you know what, it's going to come at a cost, and a higher cost than what you would have gotten if you had just used the credit card and not asked for the cash advance. So the book breaks down in chapter 6 some of the phases associated with buying, and they use the example of buying a car, so I'm going to use the same example. Usually when you buy a car, you have an idea of what kind of car you want, right? Yellow car, right? And when you're looking for a car, there's a couple features that you usually look at it, the color, how many doors does it have, how big is it, also you look at, how expensive is it going to be on my pocket. So you have to do the research to kind of figure out what exactly is it that's going to be in my best interest, right? So the book does a nice job in breaking it down into 4 easy steps. The first is pre-shopping, which just means doing your research, figuring out, what is it that I want and what is it that I need. Do I need a car, a motorcycle? Do I need a bicycle? What am I going to use to get me from point A to point B? Am I getting something to pick up girls? Am I getting something to pick up mom? To get groceries? To get a job? All these things are factored into which car best suits you. And then the second piece is evaluating the alternatives. While you're doing research, you're going to see, option A, option B, and you're going to really see exactly what's the best choice for you based on the things that you've already looked at that tell you that, have what are the advantages to getting this one versus the other one, and which one has more value to you based on your needs. The third aspect is selecting and purchasing. And at this point, you're really determining what the deal is that you want for the car or whatever item it is you're purchasing. And, determining, do you want all the bells and whistles? Do you want, to have spoilers? Do you want it to be like fire green? Do you want to have Wi-Fi in the dashboard? All these things are part of your deal, and also determine if you're going to pay that extra buck for some of those extra features. And then the final is post-shopping activities and making sure that you weren't cheated out of your money, because sometimes what could happen is if you buy a used car versus a new car, you might end up having to put more money into making it run efficiently, and that's not good. And we're going to talk about some of the things that protect you as a consumer from getting gypped. So to continue with car purchases, some of these cars that you actually end up buying come with warranties, which are just guarantees from the manufacturer that they're going to, take care of any discrepancies or any issues with the car that you might find while driving it. Most warranties come limited, which just means that the time frame that these agreements are under is limited. So you might have a 1-year warranty or a 2-year warranty. That just means for the next 2 years, if you do find an issue with the car, you can bring it in and they'll fix it at no cost. A full warranty covers the whole car. So if the car ends up being a piece of garbage that you can't use, you could return the car and get your car back. Now, the reason you don't see too many full warranties on cars is because the cost associated with giving you a new car and getting a garbage car is extremely high. So sometimes you'll only get full warranty on parts of the cars because the cost of replacing a part is substantially less than replacing the part of a car. A service contract is usually known as an extended warranty, because sometimes what happens when the warranty ends, then you end up with the brunt of the cost when you have to fix a car. And this happened to me when I bought my second car. They wanted to give me an extended warranty for about $1,000, right? So if you remember, the warranties are at no cost to you. It's usually at the cost of the business who's giving you the product. But this is different. It's like insurance. You pay to get the warranty extended. You pay a upfront cost or a monthly fee for the service, and it's supposed to be cost effective, because if you have to fix it yourself, you'll end up paying for the total cost, which could be $2,000, $3,000. But if you end up not using the service, you end up down the drain with $1,000. So you think to yourself, man, do I really want to get an extended warranty? Well, here's another alternative, right? If you put away $100 a month just for car repairs, after 10 months you'll have $1,000, which is what you would have had to pay for that service contract. If you spend another 10 months with the car, then you'd have the $2,000 saved up for any fixing or any issues that may turn up during that time. So having some money set aside is actually a more cost-effective way of managing maintenance. Now, as a buyer, there's certain protections that you have that the law gives you. And these are ways that help you to have more comfort when you're buying used cars, and it helps the market to continue flowing, right? One of these specific laws are the lemon laws for each state. Now, when you think of lemons, you think of the saying, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. But if you end up with a bad car, it doesn't matter how much lemonade you make, you're not going anywhere, man. So this lemon law is really set to protect you from when you buy a bad car. And lemon is just a metaphor for bad engines or a bad product or something that, the seller was saying, hey, this is like the best item that you could get, and it's good. And then when you end up actually getting it, you find out, man, this thing's broken. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or the car just doesn't even turn on, right? So there's protections and there's ways to get compensated for those things. And if you take these people to court, you would, in most cases, you would win back your money. Now, the reason I say most cases is because there is a time limit or a time constraint as to how long these lemon laws are in effect, right? Because if you buy a car and then 10 years down the road it stops working, you say, oh man, you sold me a lemon, it stopped working. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. It's within the time frame of when you originally buy the car. Like, if you buy the car and then next week it doesn't turn on, then chances are you bought a lemon, and they have a responsibility to you as a business to compensate you for your losses. So, with respect to all these things, you have to kind of have a cost thrifty mindset, which just means always look for the cheaper or more cost effective option, right? Now, when I say more cost effective, sometimes the cheaper option isn't always the best option, because you have to think of what's going to give me the most value for my dollar, right? Because sometimes you would value convenience over comfort. So if you're at a dealership, right, and you find that the dealer is not giving you such a hard time to get the car that you want, you're more likely to spend a little bit more to get the car that you need, versus someone who may give you a cheap car but then say, you know what, I can't sell to you today. We have to fix it. There's some issues that we need to get done, and instead of getting the car, right when you buy it, you end up waiting a week because they're waiting for parts to come in to fix the car so you could actually have your car. So depending on what your values are and what your needs are, that might impact the value that you're getting for your dollar. When it comes to car dealerships and independent auto repair shops, right, and sending it to get repaired, this convenience option and value option are big features as to what you're going to end up paying. At a car dealership, you may find that you're not paying it as much, but it's not as convenient, because if they have a high volume of clients coming in, you're going to find that you're not going to be able to get the car on time, or they might say, you know what, we need to schedule an appointment. The next available time that we can fix your car is next week. Versus an independent auto repair shop, they're actually not liable. They have the availability, and they'll go out of their way to get your business, because that's their livelihood, but they're going to charge you a little bit more because they're providing you a service that is particular to them, right? I'll tell you, the other piece though is, even though they may charge more, and it might be based on their personal rate, car dealerships, if you find that you're being charged an exorbitant amount, they are usually associated with corporations or larger entities, that if you report that, hey, they charged me more than they were supposed to, you'll get your money back, or the value of what you're supposed to be getting. So the other big purchase, aside from your car, that you make is your first home. Some people buy homes as an investment. Some people buy homes as a place for their families to live. And some people end up never buying homes. They buy condominiums, or they just rent their whole lives. But if you do decide to buy a home, there are a few things that you should consider. The first thing that you should consider is, what are your needs? Similar to a car, when you're doing your research and evaluating what you want, you have to take a look at location and your preference. Do you want to live in the city? Do you want to live in the suburbs? Or do you want to live on a farm and raise a whole bunch of chickens? Whatever it is that you want to do, that should be a main feature of your value system, right? The other aspect, if you happen to have a family, is the quality of the education in that town, or rather the quality of life that's associated with that town. Some towns like New York City, Manhattan, have a very, very big population. So what's associated with high population, high crime rates, a lot of pollution, a lot of traffic. And if that's not something you want to deal with on a day-to-day basis, buying a house in that area is not the best idea, right? But people still do it. And then, the other aspect is location of business or future construction, because that may impact the value of your house, either negatively or positively. So these are all things that you want to take into account when you're looking at your home. Now, when you're buying a home, there are a couple aspects to what goes on in the negotiation table, right? In some cases, you do have to put a contingency clause, and what this is it's a agreement between the buyer and the seller as to what needs to happen before you could close on a deal. And some contingencies may include that, as a buyer of a house, I need to see the home 14 days before we close in order to determine if the house is in good condition. Or it could be that in order to buy the house, I need to sell my property, and then once I sell my property, I can close on a deal. But all these are agreements between the buyer and the seller, and these contingency clause could even make or break a deal in some cases. Now, some of the advantages and disadvantages associated with buying a home versus renting. Now, when I was reading the book, a lot of the values that they said in buying a home were a bit arbitrary, if I could say that, because when you're buying a home, it's a large expense, right? And some people spend 30 years, right, to pay off just the mortgage associated with the home. That doesn't even include the taxes or the cost to maintain a home. So you have to really think to yourself, is that something that's worth the value, right? But when you step back and you look at it as an investment, a way to increase your cash flow or a way to increase the value of your money, then it becomes a different advantage to buying a home, right? Because when you are paying your mortgage, you're getting equity. And equity is just another word for you're getting an asset, or you're getting a portion of the ownership of that house, right? Versus renting, you pay rent to somebody else, and that doesn't mean you own the apartment any more than you did the month before. Your money is just really going to pay for their ownership, right? And they're just providing the space for you to use it. So, I mean, some of the advantages of renting really comes down to versus home buying is really comes down to the lower amount of maintenance needed, because at the end of the day, it's not your space. The ability to easily say, you know what, I don't want to renew the lease next year. You could leave, and the big part of it is that the down payment is cheaper than a down payment on a house. So it's very cost effective, but at the end of the day, your money is not going towards equity. It's not going towards an asset that's going to build money. It's really going to pay for the other person's equity, the person who's lending you the space. Now, with buying a home, if you do have a mortgage and you do have interest payments, there is the advantage of not having to answer to anybody because it's your house. I mean, yes, you have to answer to the banks and you have to pay the mortgage, but when it comes to privacy and how you use the space, it's really up to you because you're making the payments. There's also a tax benefit associated with having a mortgage because you can make the interest payments tax deductible. So when you are making enough income to pay taxes, it is to your benefit to have some property that you own. And then, I mean, of course, the disadvantage of buying a home is your assets or your money or cash flow is locked in to paying that mortgage. And real estate tax is a major tax. You can't avoid that, because if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to pay taxes, the government robs me, I didn't vote for this president, whatever reason you decide not to pay taxes, the state or the federal government does retain the right to take your house. And it's not that they take your house and kick you out. They take your house and they sell it so that way they can get the money that they need that you owe them in back taxes. So these are things that are worth considering. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. Again, this is Professor Augusto Suarez, and this is a brief overview of what's going to be on the test. If you have any questions about the chapters that were discussed, or any things that were a little fuzzy as far as understanding, feel free to email me. My cell number is also on the post for contacting me, so you can always shoot me a text, and I'm usually pretty good. You send me a text, I'll call you back, and we could discuss some of the chapters. Good luck on the test, guys, and I hope you guys do well. And thank you so much for spending these 30 minutes with me. Take care.